Okay, hello. And welcome to the most stressful part of my week. Trying to juggle janky recording gear and some wonderful patient people in the audience. The most common question that I get asked from different people is, how do I start this startup that I'm trying to start? And I think the reason that is the most common question I get asked is because people don't talk enough about how they actually started something. So these sessions are about getting people to actually talk about how they started, and particularly people that I respect a lot in what they did. So, man, I'm so happy that you're willing to subject yourself to this. Round of applause for Nitin, please, for joining us tonight. Cool. And applause at home, thank you as well. Let's dive in. In 10 seconds, what is Maslow?
So Maslow's a mobile app for people living with disabilities, complex conditions, who have large care teams and therapy teams. What these individuals and families can do is structure a weekly routine in the mobile application, share it with their entire care team, as well as connect with all their therapists and clinicians in the one place.
Okay, so for everyone that kind of skipped that and wasn't paying enough attention yet, pay attention for anyone that is going through rehab or this needs care plans for them.
That anyone that has essentially a complex disability, so someone with a traumatic brain injury, a stroke, they might be an elderly individual, and they have daily care needs where support workers are coming into the home, clinicians are coming into the home. Maslow addresses supporting this community.
Okay, I'm just checking. I actually set up the mic right. Thank you very much, I did. Who were you before you started Maslow?
I was an occupational therapist with no clue around the startup ecosystem, but I was working in public hospitals, public tertiary hospitals, and in rehab hospitals as well. So that's my background, and I came in with, I guess, a bit of clinical experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where did the idea come from? So that's nice as a background, but where did you start to engage with this as a problem?
So all the founders were all mates. So we had a friend of ours who we'd known for over 10 years, and he'd had a traumatic injury, and he had challenges with managing a care team and explaining, his daily life to his support team. And we saw and understood his experience as mates, not as professionals. And then years later, we're all working. I'm a therapist, Andrew's a product designer, Ilya's an engineer, and we're just talking, and we're like, we could solve some of his experience purely. Not thinking about anything else, just his story, his challenges. And that was a spark of, hey, maybe we should look into this.
You're making me feel guilty for not solving other problems that I see around myself. But I think it's not an unusual experience. Everyone sees problems around them, but why did you actually start doing something about this?
I think, he was quite young when he had his particular traumatic injury. And, for a young person who's meant to be going to university, going to school, hanging out with his mates, having a beer, he didn't get to have a lot of that. He had a lot of that taken away from him because he was too busy every day trying to explain to his care team or going to therapy or trying to remember what he had to do for therapy. And so it was like, oh, cool, this would be really worth solving for a mate of ours. But looking further into it, the common age group that had traumatic injury at the time was 18 to 35. And so it being a young cohort, it was like, this is something we would like to solve for. And that was kind of the spark. And after diving into this spark, we started connecting with young people across Australia who'd also had a traumatic injury. And, there's APSI and there's Fifi, and, we started creating this community all of a sudden who helped drive us getting deeper into this problem space and co-designing Maslow with, and progress us forward and continuing on.
Okay, so did you start to think about how many people have this problem and what the opportunity is?
Yeah.
Like how well did you think it would go as a company?
I don't know how well it would do as a company, but we first, our spark was our mate. The next piece was for us was really understanding, potentially was this problem big enough to be solved, and we found out there was, thousands of people living with a traumatic injury in Australia. There's 100 million globally. Okay, there's potentially a community worth solving that's scalable. We dived very superficially into the clinical literature as well, and some of what our mate was talking about also matched in the clinical literature as well. So we're like, okay, there's potentially a wide array problem domestically and globally. Our mate's experiencing this problem. We're seeing somewhat of a trend in the literature as well. Maybe we should dive into this.
Okay, so I know you're a smart man, Andrew's a smart man, everyone on the team are very capable people. This is a scary area to get into. I start to get into medtech and how hospital systems work and everything else. Did that make you pause and think, should we really start to try and address this problem?
Yeah, huge anxiety attacks, to be very frank. I think when we started, we started with the intentions to solve for a mate who told us a story. And as we dived deeper, realising there's actually a more systematic issue happening here around the healthcare system, around how processes are conducted in the healthcare system. As a clinician that was employed by those institutions, that became a very scary thing for me, because I was like, I'm going to have to advocate to the institutions, to the clinical leaders, to the academics. And so yes, to answer your question, it was very fearful for me. But what made it easier for me was, when we had a group of 15 young people who had traumatic injuries sharing their stories, and the story was consistent, and they were like, could you solve this for us? Hypothetically, from a technology point of view, yes. And so for me, my confidence didn't come from myself, but from the community saying, hey, I'd like this to be solved. And we felt it was a worthy cause to give it a go.
I like that. Like the idea that you understand the problem really well, but you don't understand yet how hard it's going to be to solve. But that's okay, because that motivates you to try and solve it.
It's a problem worth solving for, and that if it's going to create, we're an impact-focused, organisation, business, and that's at the forefront of our minds. And if that's the opportunity we get to create, not just for the team but for the community, then that's going to be amazing.
Okay,
yeah.
So take me back. That first year of activity, what did it look like day to day?
We very initially dived very deep into clinical medical literature, only because we didn't know where to start. We didn't know what to do. I'd never done a research piece or started a business, so we dived into reading as much content as we can around the problem space. The next piece was to find someone living with a disability we could talk to, and you can't just go out in the street and say, hey, can we talk to you? We didn't know where to find the community. So we'll go to conferences, we'll go onto Facebook groups, and we'll start conversations with people who had maybe potentially similar experiences. And we built a community of 15 plus. That was our starting group. And the most important thing for us was understanding, was this problem actually a consistent problem amongst people living with disabilities. So, and then once we kind of communicated and researched with this cohort, it was designing a product, getting a prototype together, putting it into the hands of them and getting them to test that product and give feedback, and then creating an MVP that they thought would be the best solution to fit their needs.
Do you remember the first customer?
Yeah, so our first customer was someone I wouldn't call them a customer, it would probably be a user to start. And we met him at a accessibility conference, and he was 27, 28 years old. He'd just had a traumatic injury. He was talking about his experience, and we're like, this is the bloke we got to have a chat with. He was fully ready on board to join into the project, and he became the 4th team member of Maslow. And yeah, so he was our first user, customer, and team member for Maslow as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that kind of expertise on the team, the first-hand experience.
I think he was just super passionate. He's like, whatever I can do to be involved, and we're like, whatever you want to do, we'll have you on board.
Do you see that a lot? Do you see other people see the problem you're solving and say, yes, I need to actually get involved in this?
Yeah, I think that's also partly how the growth of our business has occurred, where we've had people living with disabilities, their families sign up and say, we have this same problem. And as a result of what the platform does, someone living with a complex disability, they sign up to the platform and they invite their care teams and their therapy teams. All of a sudden now we have a community of people with disabilities joining the platform, but also institutions, because their therapists and their support workers are joining onto the platform as well. And now as a result, we have a community signed up, but also institutions coming to us to say, hey, our patients, our clients are using your platform. What's Maslow?
This is one of the beautiful things about Maslow, that every time someone is being helped by it, they're signing up 10 of their care providers and 10 of their
therapists.
Yeah.
It's
wonderful how that can spread to other people that then care about other people.
Yep.
And how this can grow.
Yep. And so the organic growth for Maslow has allowed us to start partnering with clinics and institutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love technology-enabled entrepreneurship. It's what we do, startups, you can see. What were the kind of enabling technologies that make Maslow worth doing now instead of before? I can definitely imagine COVID might have helped.
In terms of, the enablers. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because when we were doing the research piece and just the co-design, it wasn't as big a conversation around digital health and virtual care. But then the narrative changed for the healthcare system when all of a sudden all their patients got locked out of the clinics and the institutions, and people were stuck at home and not having access to support. And so the narrative changed for remote care, and all of a sudden what we done became a viable solution. So that was the first piece in terms of like trends in the ecosystem. The second piece was how we launched. The community we were designing with was closed. We hadn't launched publicly. And they'd said to us, hey, we're locked out of our therapists, we're locked out of our clinicians. We need to have access in the home to support, to recommendations, to communicate with our clinicians. Can you give us access publicly so we can connect with all our clinicians in the one place so they can see how we're managing at home? So COVID was an enabler for people to connect remotely in the home digitally with their specialists.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds like one of the ingredients to early success that you had. If you said there is a particular recipe for the early success you had, what are the other ingredients that were critical?
I'm sure everyone's going to have a slightly different answer. My role is kind of customer lead, clinical lead, so I'm very deep in with the users and communicating with them and hearing their stories. We were super targeted and specific initially with the cohort that we spoke with, and it was traumatic injury. And we just learned the ins and outs of their day-to-day life, their challenges, and what actual solution will be valuable to them. We let them kind of lead us with what they think that would be. And as a result, we designed a platform for people living with traumatic injury, essentially. But when we launched, all of a sudden we had people living with mental health, autism, elderly, signing up to the platform, all saying they had the same problem. And so I think one of the biggest catalysts for us was really honing in on a problem space in a particular cohort, really listening to them. And as a result, we found that other people also shared the same experience because we designed a problem fit for purpose, a product fit for purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
So realizing that the same problem actually occurs across a much larger group of people, and a similar solution is still what they need.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that the team that you were able to build early on was critical as well?
Yeah, so I think partly for me, you know, I came from a clinical background, so I actually had some exposure to talking and communicating with families and people living with complex conditions. Andrew was essentially a product designer, a strategic thinker. Ilya was an engineer. So I think a lot of the foundational components of building a mobile app, a website, was there. And we were able to kind of bring in, you know, our skills between customer, design and commercialization, technology, to build the fundamentals of starting a business and a startup.
I know there's people watching down the camera that would kill for that kind of team to say, yeah, I want to solve this without necessarily being paid. Do you think solving this particular problem was a way of motivating that kind of broad skill set from a bunch of people, really good skills, to start work on this?
In terms of the founding team or the new team members that came on board?
Both.
I think the problem had to be worth solving for the individuals as founders. And, you know, Ilya's an engineer and he's just really good at just like building products and building technology. But he's just super like keen to build products and technology that's impactful. So that's how he's driven. Andrew was working in the social impact space, doing strategic rollouts of technology in his space. So he was already orientated to solving social problems. So I think the passion to solve an impactful problem was definitely an enabler for us, but also an enabler for like the rest of the team. You know, we've had designers, engineers, marketers join our team, and they're super passionate about leveraging their skills to solve a problem that's worth addressing.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a couple more. Everyone has things they want to solve, but people need to afford to live in Sydney, and like this is hard. How did you afford to dive into this in the early days? Yeah,
well, I don't fully how do I answer this? Everyone has a different journey as a founder. Everyone has a different way of trying to start their business. Personally, me, I just quit my job. But I was, I think, happy to do so. The reason why I did it was, you know, I'd been a clinician for 6 or 7 years, or whatever it may be, and I was comfortable with, you know, my knowledge I had there, and I was super interested in testing myself and learning a new skill and potentially getting more into digital care, digital health, virtual care. So for me, I just quit my job and dived straight into this. And so how I supported myself was working an extra job to get some cash coming through the door. But that's me, you know. Some people use savings, some people work a full-time job and they use that money to fund their startup. Some people compete for grants. There's no one way about it. Yeah. I think for me, you know, I'm more focused on actually experiencing and developing as a professional and getting to try new things, and I was happy to give that a go and just quit my job and go for it.
Well, tell me about that, because what has 2.5 years of Maslow done to you as a person?
I feel like I've gained like 10 years of experience in 2.5 years. I've developed a fair bit, because you just do so much as a founder. And it's the worst because, like, you know, you dive real deep for 3 to 6 months into design, or maybe, you know, partnership development or whatever, and you get really good at it, and then a new problem comes along which you've never done, and you've got to start the process of learning again. So the development piece has been really fascinating. I think also just the confidence piece. I was definitely not I wouldn't say I'm confident now, but wouldn't have been confident to try any of the things I do now. I'm willing to fail very quickly. We have this saying in our team, we've got to learn faster than the rate of change. And so any new information provided to us, we've got to respond to it. But also, in order to find that information, we've got to get out there and give it a go. So I think another thing I've learned is failing's okay. Give it a go, get out there, learn as quickly as possible from it, and then progress forward.
Okay. I know Maslow's doing really well at the moment, but if it wasn't, and you had to go back into the workforce in whatever thing you thought you wanted to do now, do you think it would have benefited you doing the last 2.5 years of this?
Massively.
Okay.
Massively. I'm super interested in working with impactful organisations, progressive, innovative organisations, also understanding the mechanics of how, I guess, innovation or technology is designed, developed, and scaled. And I wouldn't have had that exposure to this level, even if I was working at an organisation. So a startup has really developed me understanding those mechanics of the building blocks of what that looks like, but also all the other little things, like pitching. I hated talking publicly. I couldn't do a minute in front of a crowd. And then last year I had to pitch, I don't know if you've heard of the Optus Future Makers program.
Yes.
And there was 200 people, and I was terrified and never did any public speaking at university, and was successful to get the top spot for that one and get a bit of money for the team. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you probably don't care too much what Optus thinks of you, but or maybe you do, but it's nice to go through that exercise so that when you are telling other people about what you're doing, that talented person or that partner or that other person that's important, you're actually able to present convincingly too. So I think the pitching contests by themselves, not so great, but being able to pitch, useful.
But I think how you learn those things, whether it be a startup, pitching, whatever the skill set may be, we didn't learn that on our own. We're part of the UTS Startups community. We have mentors, some of which are sitting in this room, and we've just leveraged people who've done it better than us to learn, hey, how did you pitch? How did you commercialize? How did you build a partnership? We don't know how to do that. Someone taught us how to do that, and then we gave it a go.
Okay, I want to ask, it's 2.5 years in, what does Maslow look like today?
Yeah, busy. We started with a cohort of maybe 15 people with traumatic injuries. We now have a backlog of thousands of individuals with disabilities, their families, their care teams, their therapists, all signed up to our website, trying to access our platform. We've progressed, we've got a product in the market, people are signing up onto the platform. They're inviting their care teams independently, they're inviting their therapist teams independently, they're creating care routines and following along. I think it's been a couple of thousand routines and workouts completed in the last few months. So, the product's in market, people are using the product, but we've also now partnered with clinics who are leveraging a portal to connect with their clients, connect the teams together, and to streamline sharing of information with the family and the care teams. And an institutional partnership along the way.
Got it. There's a lot of people, if you ask, how's your startup gone through the last 2 years of COVID, you wouldn't want to put the answer on this video. But to see the kind of growth that you've had over those years is ridiculous. Question without notice, but what's coming up for Maslow? And for anyone out there that's watching this, what might they be able to get involved in?
Yeah, so really, our two biggest focuses is growth. We kind of just launched the product out there into the wild last year, and we're, falling apart and building it and falling apart again and getting it to a point where we think we've hit the mark. Now we've just got this backlog of people trying to sign on board, and we're trying to streamline that to make it as easy as possible to use the application itself. So. Doubling down on streamlining the self-service. We're partnering with clinics to give them access to a portal. We did some pre-seed funding late last year, and we'll be going for some seed funding later this year as well. So those are the things in our works.
Okay, so for the right kind of investor that sees the opportunity in this, they should reach out?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, if they care about impact, if they care about scalable, support and care for those with a disability or a condition. We like to think we're going to try to be the Atlassian to the care and rehab place, or care and rehab environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in StartMate at the moment as
Yep.
well, yeah?
Yeah.
Recommended?
Highly recommend it. StartMate's such a good ecosystem. The biggest value StartMate has is their mentor network and just incredible mentors. So that's probably some of the biggest value you're going to get out of it if you go for StartMate. And so every team gets allocated certain mentors, and we're focusing on certain problem spaces in our business, and they're helping us support us progress forward in reaching those goals.
Yeah, and they're incredibly competitive to get into, incredibly good in their selection. I don't think you're going to have any problem finding investors. My last question before throwing to the audience, and we will throw to the audience with the camera off, but I'll explain why in a second. Looking back, imagine yourself before you started out with Maslow, watching through the camera, because I know there's thousands of people that are going to watch this video who are aspiring entrepreneurs. What advice would you have for yourself before you started?
It's a hard one. I'd say I think just have a bit of not confidence, but just have the context. It's going to be okay. You are going to develop out of this. You are going to benefit out of this. If you really want to start a startup, if that's actually what you really want to do, go for it. It's going to be scary. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you're going to be okay. And potentially, likely, unlikely, whatever it may be, you potentially might build a business out of this. So my main thing is just give it a go. And now, whether it's Maslow, if I leave Maslow, whatever it is, I'll always, off this learning, give anything a go.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe don't quit your job straight away.
It's up to you.
Depends how much you like the job.
Look, it's what you have the appetite for, what your circumstances. Take your time or just go for it. It's okay. There's no right or wrong.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for that, man. It's a beautiful company, beautiful people, beautiful story. We're going to put the URL in the bottom of this video, and I'm going to turn off the camera or stop the stream because we're going to throw to audience questions for the really juicy part. If you're watching this stream and you want to check out the juicy parts or just come and hang out with really good people, we've got a great audience of people tonight. Come down at 3:30 each Friday afternoon in UTS Startup Central, and we'll see you here. But thank you very much, Nitin.
Thanks, Murray.